So we come across to here, yeah, and then work our way back.
Yeah.
Is God supporting us in this process with some additional forces?
Of course. Like, God doesn't just say, you're on your own now. You know, like, if you were a parent looking after a child and the child, you know, become wayward, you know, become doing some things wrong, would you stand back and just go, you've made your own mistakes, so be it, you know, and not want to help them? If you loved them, you'd want to help them, would you, to overcome that? So yes, God has put into place many things. Of course, the law, the big expression of his personality is one of those things that he's put in place to correct you. But he's also put in place mechanisms via which you can get help from others. There are people in the spirit world who are now developed because they've been there for 150,000 years or less, you know, depending on how long they've been there. And they can share with you their experience and they can help you overcome the same things I've had to overcome. God's also put in place natural things that might also cause you to come into contact with experience of love on earth. And as Mary pointed out to me in the break also, God's also on earth in particular given you this sort of very gentle, compassionate way of making adjustments, rather than by the time you hit the spirit world, it's a bit more forceful. You know, so if a person doesn't make the adjustments on earth where everything is quite, I would call it almost relaxed in terms of how God's enforcing the law on earth. The law is still being enforced, but there's a lot of compassion in the way it's being enforced, and you only have to make small adjustments before you get quite big rewards. So in the spirit world, if you haven't made those changes on earth, now, you know, obviously you need extra force. You know, there's extra law force placed upon you as limitations in the spirit world. But even then, not without help. There's other people who have been through the same experience. There's also an inbuilt mechanism of the soul, actually, that God created, this soul. And we talked about this last week at Belgium, with the mechanism of the conscience, which is a mechanism that God created where the two halves of the soul could utilise the mechanism. I've drawn it as two mechanisms, but it's actually one. It belongs to the whole soul, you know, this mechanism. And it allows the Creator to share truths with you directly if you so desire. The problem is that there's a terrible lack of education on earth about these things. Does that make sense? On earth, there's no education provided about how to use the soul-based mechanisms. Now, that, again, is a direct result of choices on earth. The truth about it has been available for thousands of years, and yet the average person knows nothing about them, right? So that is indicative of the fact that many of us don't have a desire to actually know. Given the fact that the truth is available, it means many didn't have a desire to know. What brought you here? It was your desire to know. Does that make sense? You had enough open-heartedness and enough open-mindedness to make a decision and go, maybe this guy who says he's Jesus and everybody thinks he's crazy is not so crazy after all, and maybe he's got some truths, and maybe I should go along and listen and just see whether they're true or not. Right? Now, we all have that potential experience with every truth that's out in the universe. You know, a lot of them may seem quite out there, but we've got to allow ourselves to be open-hearted and open-minded enough to discover new things. So obviously you guys are, otherwise you wouldn't be here, but many aren't, because many just live their life automaton, or on automatic. But God's created these beautiful parts of you, even your conscience, but also helpers from outside to help you to learn how to use these things, how to use everything that you've been given as a gift. He's done that. So the way I've approached my life is that it's all like an experiment, yeah? But it's also a joyful experiment. Many of us approach it like it's a really hard experiment, but it actually can be a joyful experiment, and no matter what pain you experience, actually.